Files podcast.
Okay, so we've got these excerpts from Witnessed, Budd Hopkins' book. And wow, talk about a deep dive into UFOs and alien abductions. This one's intense.
You know, what's fascinating about this case is how Hopkins goes beyond just one person's story. He's got all these witness accounts, official documents, even messages from this mysterious third man.
It's a lot to take in. We're talking multiple witnesses, police officers, even hints of like a government cover-up. And at the center of it all is Linda Cortile.
Yeah, Linda's experience is really the heart of this whole thing. It raises all sorts of questions, like what's really going on here? What are the implications if this is all real, you know?
Right. So let's start with Linda. Initially, she didn't believe in UFOs, right? So what changed? What makes her story so compelling?
So, yeah, Linda was a total skeptic at first, but then she starts experiencing all these strange things, missing time, trouble sleeping, this overwhelming fear. But what really sets her apart is the level of detail and consistency she gives, especially during her hypnotherapy sessions.
Okay, back up for a sec. Hypnotherapy, where they put you in a trance to uncover hidden memories.
Exactly. And during those sessions, Linda described feeling numb, being moved around like a puppet, going through this bizarre body inventory. It's like they were cataloging her. She even remembers this long instrument being put into her nostril.
Okay, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Did she describe what these beings looked like?
Hopkins calls them emergents, these small gray beings that seem to just, appear and disappear at will. He suggests they might even be like bioengineered robots sent by a more advanced intelligence.
Bioengineered robots. Hold on, that's getting pretty wild.
It is. And there's another thing. Linda seemed to understand this alien language, even though she couldn't explain it consciously. It's there's this level of communication we don't even get.
So it's not just seeing a UFO. It's like this intense personal experience that just messes with your mind.
Exactly. And in Linda's case, it wasn't just her. There were two police officers, Richard and Dan, who got involved. Can you imagine? They see this woman floating outside a window in the middle of the night.
I'd be freaking out. Were they believers in UFOs before all of this?
No, not at all. Super skeptical, actually. They thought it was a prank, maybe a runaway, But their skepticism went out the window when they saw Linda just suspended in midair.
Okay, I need to hear this. How did they describe what they saw?
They said she looked like a white marble doll hanging in the air. They were terrified, thought she was a goner. The detail of Linda looking like a Christmas tree doll, that's something both she and the officers described. Spooky, right?
It's hard to argue when you've got multiple witnesses seeing the same thing. So what happened next? After Linda was back on the ground, did the police believe her?
Well, Dan, one of the officers, remained suspicious. He even checked her feet, wanted to make sure she wasn't, one of them disguised as a human. Richard, though, seemed more sympathetic. He even comforted her on the drive back to her apartment.
It's interesting how they reacted so differently, even after seeing something so, unbelievable. What do you think caused that?
It shows the psychological impact, right? When you're faced with something you can't explain, some people double down on their skepticism, while others, they open up to the possibility of the unknown.
Yeah, makes sense. Everyone's got their own way of coping with the impossible, I guess. Speaking of impossible, we can't forget the third man. This guy's present during the abduction, but hidden. What do we know about him?
Well, he's described as this powerful figure with ties to a foreign government. He even drove a Rolls-Royce, which Hopkins later linked to a specific UN mission.
A Rolls-Royce in the UN. This is sounding more and more like a spy thriller or something. And this third man, he actually sent letters to Budd Hopkins, right?
He did, and they're cryptic to say the least. He mentions these official problems, claims to be influencing world peace, even warns Hopkins about the dangers of revealing the truth.
It's hard to know what to make of that. Was he warning Hopkins, trying to control the narrative, or maybe seeking validation for his own experiences? It's a real puzzle.
Yeah, his motives are totally unclear. What is his role in all this? Is he a protector, a manipulator, or something else entirely? We just don't know.
This is already a lot to absorb, and we haven't even gotten to the other witnesses. Who else is involved in all of this?
Well, there's Janet Kimball, who contacted Hopkins on her own. She sent him these detailed drawings of the craft, the same one from Linda's abduction, but done in crayon.
Crayon drawings. Sounds like something a kid would do. Did Hopkins take her seriously?
He did, actually, because even though they were simple, they matched up with Linda's description. Pretty hard to dismiss, right?
So we've got two people Totally different backgrounds, describing the same unusual craft.
It's pretty compelling. But wait, there's more, right? You mentioned other witnesses.
Oh, yeah. There's Marilyn, a friend of Linda's. They had this shared dream, but it was more like a nightmare, you know. Both described being in this strange room, long table, weird figures, and this growing sense of panic.
Okay, this shared dream, that's really creepy.
Could it be like some sort of implanted memory or a psychic link, maybe?
It's definitely a possibility. They even both described this red and silver thing that looked like a Coca-Cola can.
Yeah.
That's pretty specific. Maybe it's a trigger for a hidden memory.
And the panic, that adds another layer.
Yeah.
Like they were both experiencing the same trauma. Do you think this shared experience could be a clue to the purpose of the abductions?
Maybe. It suggests that these beings are messing with like human consciousness in ways we don't get. What are they trying to achieve with these shared experiences? It's a good question.
This is getting pretty wild. Multiple witnesses, strange encounters, and this third man lurking in the background. Where do we even go from here?
Well, we're just getting started. There's a lot more to unpack in Linda's story. We still need to look at the accounts from her relatives, the sand samples, and the possibility that her family was like targeted for generations.
Wow, okay. It sounds like this deep dive is about to get a whole lot deeper.
You know, it's kind of unsettling, right? With each new bit of information, it's like more questions pop up. We've got these witnesses, the third man, but we still don't know like why these abductions are happening. What's the point?
Yeah, it's like a puzzle, but with half the pieces missing.
Yeah.
What were these beings doing to Linda? And why her family? That's a lot to wrap your head around.
Right. Hopkins, he suggests maybe they're doing some long-term study of humans. He points to that body inventory thing Linda described under hypnosis and how multiple generations of her family might be involved.
That's kind of scary if you think about it. Like
Yeah.
we're lab rats or something in this big cosmic experiment. Any clues in the excerpts about what exactly they're studying, though?
Remember those sand samples, the ones Richard talked about? He was digging in the sand with Linda and these small beings. And later he has this flashback of being on the craft, and those same samples are going through some kind of machine.
Oh, yeah, the sand analysis.
Yeah.
What if they're, like, studying our planet in ways we can't even comprehend? And what about Linda's alien language skills? Is that some kind of implant, a psychic thing?
Right. So many questions. Hopkins thinks maybe the sand was being analyzed for its minerals or even for like tiny life forms we can't see.
Back.
As for Linda's language, maybe advanced tech or even telepathic communication.
Telepathy. That's straight out of sci-fi. But then again, so is everything else in this case, I guess.
Pretty much. The lines get blurry, you know, what's real, what's not.
And the weirdness keeps coming. Didn't one of the officers see the craft again?
Yeah, Dan, he was in Rome and saw the craft again. And this time, he sees this white fabric caught in a door on the craft. He thought it was Linda's nightgown.
Wait, so they saw Linda twice on the craft, once in New York, and then later in Rome.
That's what they're saying. Yep, both officers saw it. Makes you wonder, were they both taken on board? What happened during that missing time? So many unanswered questions.
This is getting hard to keep track of. Each new detail just adds more mystery. What about Linda's relatives, Kathy and Frank? They saw something too, right?
He did. They were driving near Linda's apartment and saw this red UFO the same night she was taken. Since they were in a car, they saw it for longer from different angles.
So that's important because it backs up the timing and the location.
Right.
And harder to dismiss as just a mistaken identity because they were moving.
Exactly. Their account puts the UFO right where Richard and Dan saw Linda floating. It's hard to explain away when you've got that kind of independent confirmation.
Okay, so we've got Linda, the two cops, Janet Kimball, and her drawings, and now Linda's relatives all seeing this strange craft. Anyone else come forward?
Oh, yeah. Remember Brian, the friend's son who was staying at Linda's? He talked about seeing these small beings, too, called them emergents.
Hold on. Emergence. That's the same word Linda used for the small aliens. It's like these experiences are contagious or something. Does Hopkins think that just being around someone who's been abducted can expose you to these beings?
That's what he suggests. Maybe there's a psychic element to it, you know, some way for these beings to influence the minds of people who come in contact with abductees. Sounds a little far-fetched, I know.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit creepy. But it would explain why so many people connected to Linda had these weird experiences.
Right. And then there's Francesca, Linda's neighbor, who also had a scary experience. A bright light, feeling terrified, and a voice, but no one there.
That's scary. So
Yeah.
maybe these things are happening more than we realize. Maybe it's happening to people who just don't fully remember?
That's a good point. How many people have had similar experiences but just dismiss them as dreams or hallucinations?
It makes you think.
Yeah.
What if we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg? But for now, let's go back to Linda's son, Johnny. Didn't he have some weird dream about a melody?
He did, and then later he mentioned this really important detail. He told Hopkins about meeting this old guy who gave him a diver's helmet. And when he was shown some photos, guess what? Johnny identified that man as the third man.
Wait, the third man gave Linda's son a diver's helmet. What's the connection there? Why target a kid?
Yeah, it's unsettling, right? Why involve a child? Is it some kind of manipulation tactic, trying to keep the adults quiet? Or something even worse, maybe that helmet was like a symbolic thing, a way for the third man to communicate with Johnny subconsciously?
This is just getting more disturbing.
Yeah.
So many adults involved, this mysterious third man operating behind the scenes, and now a child pulled into this whole bizarre thing. It's just wrong.
You're right, it raises all sorts of ethical questions. What about consent? Free will? The potential for manipulation in these encounters. And we haven't even talked about the psychological impact on everyone involved.
It's like we're peeling back layers of an onion, and each layer is just more and more unsettling.
The onion metaphor, that's perfect. And as we go deeper into Linda's story, there are even more layers to uncover.
It's amazing, really, how much we've uncovered already. This whole web of witnesses, the third man, and the possibility that Linda's whole family, like generations of them, were targeted. What gets me is how consistent the details are, even from different people.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore, right? The descriptions of the craft, the beings, even the feeling, the atmosphere, it all points to something, well, something real happening, especially when you consider who these witnesses are, you know? It's not like they're making this up.
Right, like that Christmas tree doll thing. Both Linda and the cops use that phrase. Super weird, but it lines up.
Exactly. Those little details, they add up. Makes it hard to just say it was all in their heads. Or a hoax, you know?
And that shared dream Linda and Marilyn had. Same unsettling scene, the long table, the figures, just bizarre.
Oh, and there's something else about Marilyn's account that's really interesting. She mentions a detail that Linda left out at first. There was a young boy on that table.
Wait, are we talking about Johnny, Linda's son?
Yeah, Johnny. Marilyn described seeing him there, clear as day. Linda didn't want to admit it at first, but it adds this whole other disturbing layer to everything.
It's just messed up. Think about a kid being involved in something like that. Makes you question what these beings are after and what it does to people, especially kids, in the long run.
Definitely. It makes us face some uncomfortable possibilities, right, about what these encounters really are and the potential for, I don't know, manipulation, even exploitation. It's heavy stuff.
No kidding. And we can't forget that physical evidence, like the sand samples Richard saw on the craft, what was the big deal about those?
Those sand samples are a real puzzle piece, a tangible link to what Lindy and the officers went through. Richard saw those samples being processed on the craft through some kind of machine, and he specifically mentioned the sand having this milky coating afterwards.
Milky coating. What was that? Did Hopkins have any idea?
He did send the samples for analysis, and the results, well, they showed a mineral makeup that was really unusual, hard to explain. It suggests maybe that these beings were studying our planet in ways we just don't grasp yet.
It's like peeking into this hidden world, right?
Mm-hmm.
One that operates right under our noses with its own rules, its own agenda. Kind of spooky, if you ask me.
Definitely makes you think. And it brings us back to that third man. What was his deal? Was he trying to help Hopkins or get in his way?
His messages, his connections to powerful people, it all suggests he knew a lot more than he was letting on, that's for sure.
Hopkins even thought maybe the third man was part of some bigger group, maybe even a government agency, keeping tabs on all this.
So we're not just talking about aliens, but maybe a government cover-up too.
It's a real possibility. The third man's warnings about, keeping quiet and his ties to the world stage, it all hints at layers of secrecy we might never fully understand.
It's a lot, man. Aliens, witnesses, a third man, pulling strings, and maybe the government's in on it too. Where do we even go from here? What's the takeaway?
That's the question, isn't it? Hopkins doesn't give us all the answers, but he pushes us to consider all the options, to stay open-minded, and he stresses the need for, more research, more digging.
Yeah, it's clear we're just scratching the surface here. This whole thing challenges everything we think we know about the world, about our place in the universe. It's pretty profound when you really think about it.
Absolutely. This deep dive into Witnessed, it's given us a lot to ponder. Maybe the real value isn't in the answers, but in the questions it raises.
So if you were Linda, what would you do next? Keep searching for answers. or try to forget the whole thing. This case, it definitely leaves us with more questions than answers, and maybe that's the scariest part of all.
If anyone out there is curious about Linda Cortill's story and wants to learn more, you gotta check out Budd Hopkins' book, Witnessed. It's a fascinating read, and it'll definitely make you question everything you thought you knew about the world.
Remember, folks, the truth is out there.
And don't forget to subscribe for episode 2, The Slenderman Mysteries. An internet urban legend comes to life. Thank you for being here.